Good morning, this is Miss Parks, and today we're going to talk about inverse variation, but we're actually going to talk about direct, inverse, and joint variation, which is just a combination of more than one thing. So for inverse variation, as something goes up, the other goes down. So for example, like if the price, as the price of gas goes up, the amount of gas you can buy goes down with the money you have. And then direct variation is as something goes up, so like the more gas you have, the more miles you can drive, and they go in the same direction. For inverse variation, you're going to have a fraction, so that's what we've just been doing with or what we will be doing with the rational equations and the rational functions. So, like, let's say I have y is equal to 8 over x. Every time I make x bigger, y will get smaller. So like if x is 1, y will equal 8. If x is 2, y will equal 4. If x is, let's say, 4, y would equal 2. And if x is 8, y is equal 1. So as these numbers got bigger, these numbers got smaller. So they go in opposite directions. Let me just kind of point it here. As the y values go up, the x values go down. That's inverse variation. Okay, and then direct variation, y is equal to a over x. And then the a value, a is called the constant of variation. All right, so what you want to do is solve for y. And then when you solve for y, the a value has to be the whole number, or you have to be able to write it in one of these two terms for direct or inverse, okay? So if I solve for y here, for the first one, I'm going to have y is equal to 5 over x, okay? And that's inverse variation. For the second one, it's neither, because you don't have anything. It either has to be a times x or a divided by x, one or the other. So this one is neither. And then for the third one, if we solve for y, we can multiply both sides by 2, and y would equal 2x. So this one is direct variation. Okay? So you guys go ahead and try the next 3 problems, please. All right, so if I divide by x, we're going to have y is equal to negative 0.25 over x, and that's inverse variation. For the second one, if I actually, I don't need to divide anything. Y is equal to 6x. So this is direct variation. It's already in the format that it needs to be in. And for this one, y is equal to negative x plus 10. So this one is neither. All right. Now what are we going to do if we have a table? So in a table, you can also tell whether you have inverse or direct variation. So what you need to do is you can try to take this table and take a look at it like here. You can see if they're either dividing. So like if I do this division, 2 over negative 12, that's 1 over negative 6, and then 4 over negative 6 is negative 2/3. So it's not division. So then we look at multiplication. So this equals negative 24. If I multiply these two together, and these two together, negative 24. So x times y equals negative 24. That means that y is equal to negative 24 over x, because everywhere in this problem, if you multiply x times y, it equals negative 24. This is inverse variation. All right. So let's see what we have. X times y is 2. X times y is 8. So it's not x times y is not consistent. Let's do x divided by y. All right, so let's go over this one. We're going to first try to see if we can multiply the x and the y to the same number, which we tried. So this is a half, or this is 2. If I multiply x times y, this is 8, 24. So it's not multiplication, so we're going to try division. X divided by y, x divided by y, and x divided by y. So these aren't equal either, because we have 1/2, 1/2, 3/8, and 1/4. So this is neither. Okay, it's not consistent all the way through. Go ahead and try the next two and see if you find consistency either in multiplication or in division on these two. Actually, go ahead and do the next four. That would be great. All right. So for this one, if I multiply, I get negative 12, negative 12, negative 12, negative 12. So again, x times y equals negative 12. So y is equal to negative 12 over x. And that's inverse variation. For the next one, if I multiply, I get 48. And then I get 64. So multiplication isn't the way. If I divide this and I reduce that, that's 1/12. If I divide that, that's 1/4. So this is neither. We don't have a consistency either way. For number 4, if I multiply, I get negative 80. Then I get negative 45. So it's not multiplication. If I divide this, I get negative 4 over 20. Which is negative 1/5. If I divide this, I also get negative 1/5. And if I divide that, they all give you negative 1/5. So x over y is equal to negative 1/5. So I'm actually going to cross multiply here, and I'm going to get negative y is equal to 5x. So y is equal to negative 5x. So this is direct variation. Okay. You can see as, that they have each divide to the same thing. For this one, if you multiply, you get 60, 60, 60, and 60. So they do all multiply to the same number. So x times y is equal to 60. So y is equal to 60 over x. So that is inverse variation. And that's the formula. All right. Let's continue here. So what we're going to do is we're going to make there's 2 questions here, by the way. And our 2 answers to these questions will come in the last 2 columns. I'm always going to have you do 4 columns. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, and then the 4th one. Okay, so it says the variables x and y vary inversely. Okay, so that's the first thing you're going to write. Y is equal to a over x. That's the inverse variation formula. Okay, the second part, you're going to actually solve for a. Okay, so that's going to be the second part. So it says y is 4 when x is 3. Y is 4 when x is 3. So you're basically filling in everything here except for the a value. So 12 is equal to a if you multiply both sides by 3 or cross multiply, whichever way you want to look at it. That's the second part. Okay, so the first part actually, our first answer will be here, a, and our second answer will be here. So the first question asks, write an equation that relates x and y. What that is this equation with a filled in. So we take the first equation and we fill in a. Okay, so it's just like this equation up there. The last part, so this is answer to the first part. We take the first equation and fill in a. Okay, so take first column and fill in the a value. This is all variables. Okay, this first column is all variables. And then for the last column, we're going to find y when x is equal to negative 2. So we're going to use this equation, and we're going to find y when x is equal to negative 2, and that's negative 6. And that's the second answer. All right, so always remember we're going to do 4 columns. First column, all variables. Second column, solve for a. Third column, you're actually going to have an answer, which is basically the first equation with a filled into it. And then you're going to use that equation to solve the last column. All right? Here we go. X and Y vary inversely. Anytime you have inversely, that's the only time you actually have a fraction, okay? Next, y equals 8 when x equals 4. So we're going to solve for a. Y is equal to 8 when x is equal to 4. So if we multiply both sides by 4, if you think of it, you can even cross multiply here. So a is equal to 32. Next, we're going to write the original equation with a filled in. So that's the answer to part A. And then for part B, we're going to use this equation and we're going to find y when x is equal to negative 16. So y will equal negative 2. So answer to part A and answer to part B. All right. Let's go ahead and do the next problem. For the next problem, 1, 2, 3, and then the fourth one's going to actually have us have a whole bunch of answers, so you'll see that in a minute. So the time that it takes in hours for a group of volunteers to build a playground varies inversely. Okay, so time varies inversely with the number of volunteers. Okay, you can put N or you can put B for volunteers. The word inversely, or when you see varies inversely, that's where your equal sign goes. And then the inversely part means that it's a fraction. And A is always in every single one of these equations, A is in there. Okay. Next, we're going to solve for A. It takes a group of 10 volunteers, 8 hours to build the playground. So 8 hours, we're going to solve for A. 10 volunteers, we'll cross multiply. A is equal to 80. Third part, we take this equation and we plug that in. T is equal to 80 over N. So this is, it says to make a table. We're not going to make a table. So we have this formula that we're using. And then we could make a table, I guess, if we wanted to. So let's, we could do X and Y. Instead of X and Y, we could do T. And we could do N. Okay, so the volunteers are the number, so we have N is for the volunteers, right? So if the volunteers are 15, 20, 25, and 30. So every time we switch this, so for 15, it would be 80 over 15 if we're using this formula. So 80 over 15 is 5.3. Okay, if we do the second one, if we do 80 over 20, that's 4. For the next one, we do 80 over 25, it's going to be 3.2. And for the last one, if we do 80 over 30, that's going to be about 2.7. Okay, and so these are the hours. And down here, these are the volunteers. So the question says, what happens to the time it takes to build as the number of volunteers increases? Well, obviously, as I increase the volunteers, it's going to take less time to build the playground. And that shouldn't be surprising to you. So basically, as the volunteers increase, the time it takes decreases. And that's the definition of inverse variation. Okay? So go ahead and do the same thing with extra example 4. Please pause the video and then go ahead and do the problem. And then don't do these because I'm going to put in some extra questions that we're going to do in a minute. Okay? All right, so hopefully you finished this already. Time it takes in hours for roofers varies inversely with the number of roofers. Okay. It takes 4 roofers, so N is the number of roofers. You could use R if you want to. 9 hours. So A is equal to 36. So T is equal to 36 over N. And now we'll make a table. So T, N, so number of roofers are 2, 96, 9, and 12, which is a really weird number. So let me put these in order. 2, 12, no, 2, 9, 12, and 96. Can't believe there'd be that many roofers. We'll just use these numbers, so 2, 6, 9, and 12. And this will be 6, 4, and 3. So obviously, as the number of roofers go up, the hours that it takes goes down. All right, so now I'm going to be doing 3 problems from your homework. Okay, so you have a homework paper, a worksheet that I'll either send you digitally or give it to you in class, depending on how it goes this year. And we're going to do 3 problems to start off so you can see what I would like you to do. Okay, number 7, the value of real estate, so they use letter V, varies jointly. Okay, so when we're doing these problems, something, we'll just say Y, in this case it's going to be V. Whenever the varies part comes in, the A will be here, always. And then you have directly, inversely, and jointly. Okay, so the only time you're going to have a fraction is if you see the word inverse. Okay, so V, the value, remember we're going to do 4 columns. V varies jointly with the neighborhood index and the square footage of the house. Now, I don't like to use S because my S's look like 5. The word inverse isn't in here. That means that there's not going to be a fraction. So I'm going to say N for the neighborhood index. And I'm going to use F for the square footage of the house. Actually, let's just use S since it's here. S, make sure it doesn't look like a 5. Now, we're not doing S squared. They give you the formula, and S is equal to the square footage. Again, the reason we don't have a fraction here is because there's nowhere where it says inverse. Okay, so the only time you have a fraction is if you see the word inverse in the problem, or varies inversely, or something like that. So we have vans. That's a joke. All right, next, second column, we solve for A. Okay, so remember, always in the second column, solve for A, and please use correct variables. So B is 376,320. A is what we're solving for. N is 96. S is 1,600. Okay, so I'm going to divide both sides by 96. So you just put 376,320 divided by 96, and then put divided by 1,600. Okay, so you're going to do that separately, and you should get 2.45 for A. So again, in your calculator, 376,320 divided by 96, and then divided by 1,600. All right. Now, third column is always the first column with A filled in. So that's the formula. Okay. Third column is always the formula. Last column is where you solve what they want you to find. So find the value of a property with this stuff. All right, so we use the formula. It says find the value, so we're finding B. We already know that A is 2.45. N is going to be 83. And S, the square footage, is 2150. So the value of this house is going to be $437,202.50. Okay? So that's how I would like you to solve those. Go ahead and try number 15 and see how you do. All right, so here we go. The time needed to paint a fence varies directly. So T varies directly. That's going to be an equal sign, always followed by an A. Directly means that that number is going to go at the top with the length of the fence. So length. And indirectly. So indirectly is the same as inversely. That means that there's going to be a fraction with the number of painters. Okay, so I'm going to put P at the bottom for a number of painters. So that's the formula. Okay, time varies directly. That's where your equal sign is. There's always an A on the other side of the equal sign, and the A is always in the numerator. Directly with the length. So anytime it's directly, that's in the numerator. Anytime it's inversely, it's in the denominator. Okay? And so now we're going to solve for A. Okay? So for the second part, we're going to solve for A. It takes 5 hours, so you need to make sure you put everything in here will have a number except for A. Okay? 5 hours. That's T. Make sure you put the variables in the right places. 200 feet of fence. That's the length. With 3 painters. So that's what we have. So in order to solve this, I'm going to multiply both sides by 3 and divide by 200. Why? Because this 3 will cancel that 3. That 200 will cancel that 200. If you rather cross multiply and do 5 over 1 equals 200A over 3, and then do 200A equals 15, and then divide by 200. That'll be fine as well, okay? So if you divide here, you get 3 over 40 if you want to do a fraction, or you can use 0.075 if you want to use a decimal. I prefer fractions. They're exact. In this case, this decimal is an exact value. So you didn't do any rounding. So either one of those is fine. So now we're going to take this formula and fill in A. So 0.075 length over painters. And then we'll use that to solve the last part. Okay, so we have 5 painters. And we have 500 feet of fence, and we don't know how much time it takes. Okay, so if you multiply that out, it's going to take 7.5 hours. And you need to put the right units in at the end. Okay, they're asking you how much time it will take. Here, they ask you what the cost was, so we need to put that in terms of money. Now, let's say that you use 3 over 40 instead. You would just get T is equal to 3 over 40 times 500, and then this times 5. So you would have gotten 1,500 over, what is that, 200? So 15 over 2, which is 7.5 hours. All right, last one. See how you do. Be careful here because we have a radius squared, all right? All right, so hopefully you finish that and pause the video and then come back and play that. All right, So the number of gallons, G, in a circular swimming pool varies jointly with the square of the radius and the depth of the pool. There's no fraction because there's no inverse. Okay, so this is a general formula. No inverse means no fraction. Next, we're going to solve for A. So G is 754. That's how many gallons. R is 4. So this is going to be 4 squared. Okay, and then D is 2. So we have 754 is equal to 32A. And then you divide both sides by 32. And A is equal to 23.5625. 23.5625. Now, if you wanted to do that, 32 is just made up of a bunch of 2s. So let's see if we do 754 divided by 2, then that would be 377 over 16. If you want to use that instead, you could. I have a feeling most of you will use that. If you're going to use a decimal, please don't round the decimal. Just use all the numbers. Okay? So now we're going to use this formula here with A plugged in. So G is equal to 23.5625 times R squared D. That's your formula. And then the last part, find the number of gallons in the pool. So find G. We have 23.5625. This will be 3 squared because R is 3, so that's 9. And then the depth is 1.5. If you multiply all that out, there's approximately 318.1 gallons of water in the pool. All right. So that covers it. I will give you a worksheet, or you should already have this worksheet that has all of these problems on it, and this is how I would like you to set them up, please. Thank you.